Hello guys, my name is Lucas and welcome to part 2 of this video where we're learning how to get our items to show in our Unity application. In the last video we prepared all the graphics and the UI for us to show our items, and today we're going to learn how to populate the information here with actual data from our server depending on what user logged in. To do this we're going to be using PHP and also we're going to be using simple JSON. If you don't know what JSON is, I have a video teaching how to use simple JSON with Unity. You can click on the card here on the right, or you can go to the link in the description to learn more about it. Before we begin, I want to deeply thank all of my subscribers and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. And let's give a warm welcome to our newest patron, John. This is awesome. We got 2 new patrons in such a short time. Thank you so much, John, for joining our patron list. Your support means the world to me, and if you have any request, please let me know and send me a message and I will try my best to help you. And if you guys would like to help me financially and make this Patreon list look a little bit bigger, remember that there is a link to my Patreon page in the description of this video. Thank you so much, and now let's begin. So the first thing we need to do is getting our data from our server as a JSON file, and we can do that with a PHP file. So let's go to Visual Studio Code, and I already made a PHP file. It's called getitemsids.php, and this allows us to get all the item IDs from a specific user. I made it based on getusers.php, so it's very similar. I will put it next to it. You can see we create a connection, we check the connection, then we have a SQL which is a little bit different. So in this case, the SQL here is select username. Here we are selecting the item ID from another table. This is the users items table. Here is select username and level from the users table. And that's it. But here we have a condition. We have where our user ID is equals to 1. That means that here I want to get all the items, all the ID of the items from the user whose ID is 1. That one, we can have it with a variable that we're going to do later, so that whatever the ID of the user that logged in is requesting this, we're going to get those items. So after that, it's very similar. We have the result. We check the number of results here, and if it's greater than 0, we do a while loop. But here is something different. Here I created an array. Arrays in PHP are very simple. We just create them like that. And then in each row, the value in that row is equals to this, which is the result for that row. I hope it makes sense. I will put a link in the description to learn more about arrays in PHP. After we finish that while loop, after the whole array is created, we're going to encode it into JSON. And it's a very easy function. It's just called JSON_encode, and we have to pass a array of something. In this case, is our array of IDs from the items. So that's what happened if there were more than one result, but if our user did not have any item, we're just going to return 0 results, or we can have a code like 0, which is going to mean something like false, so that we know what to do if the result equals 0, we can show no items or something like that. After all this is finished, we close the connection, and that's enough for us to get our items. So put these get items IDs in your server file, in your server folder, and we will be ready to test it. So now let's go to PHP MyAdmin, and in our Unity Backend tutorial database, I added one more item. I just wanted to have more variety. I have a oak wood. It's just another item. And we're going to try to get all the items from that user. If you see here, users items, there is one user, the user with ID 1, who has item 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to try that here. It should be index of backend Unity tutorials. Here we have get items ids.php, and you see that I get a JSON array. So this is the structure of a JSON array. We have JSON objects inside separated by a comma, which each of them tell us that the item ID is 2, 3, and 1. So with this array, we know how many items we have to create here in Unity. Remember that we created a prefab for the items, so we can actually use this item in a for loop and create it and make it a child of this background here so that they will arrange automatically. And we need to fill the information of each item that we get based on the ID. So we need to create a new PHP file, and it's going to be called, let me close this, it's going to be called get item, just that. So new, save as, get item. I always forget to change it to PHP, so I have some text files there. PHP, and here we are going to get the information of our item. We are going to reference this login.php file, so let's copy all of this. Get item.php, we're going to copy it here. We do the connection, so we don't have to touch this. We need to have a login user and a login pass. Is that true? Yes, but we're not going to use it right now, so I'm going to comment it. I'm going to explain this later. We're going to create a connection. That's correct. Check the connection, yes. And now here we want to change the SQL. So we want to select, as I said, we want to select the name, the description, and the price. Name, description, and price from items where ID is equals to item ID. So now we want to create a variable for item ID here. So here, variables submitted by user, we want to add a new variable. We're going to call it item ID, like that. And it's going to be equals to underscore post item ID, just like that. Now we can use this variable here, and that is going to go into our SQL. So it can compare the ID with the ID that we required and get us the description, the price, and the name. Now we need to change a little bit here how we fetch the results. We're going to make it a little bit similar to here. We're also going to echo it as a JSON. So we're just going to copy here all this. Here all the way down here. All of this, we're going to replace it with this here. If the number of results is greater than 0, we're going to get the results and put them into a JSON file. Otherwise, if the number of results is 0, we're going to echo 0 so that we know that we couldn't get the information of that item or that that item does not exist in our database. Then we simply close the connection and we're ready to try this. So here we need to submit an ID, and because I want to try it immediately from the browser, I'm just going to type an ID here. So let's say we want to get the item with ID of 2. I'm going to set it manually there, and now we can go back to localhost and try this. Get item, it's just get item. And we should get name is equals to potion, description, here's your hero, and then the price is 25. That is a JSON object with different types of information inside, and we're going to use that to fill the information here in Unity. Now, we don't want to call this from our browser, we want to call it from Unity. So let's make our variables dynamic again by making them a post type variable. And also here in get items IDs, we are going to have to add one more thing here, the user ID. It needs to be dynamic, so I'm going to create a new part here. User submitted variables, and here we're going to create a user ID variable. It's going to be, let's get it from here, just like that. Of course, this is going to be called user ID. And remember, this can be any user ID. If we have a friend's user ID, we can use that ID to get our friend's items instead. Post is called user ID, just type it same. And here, I don't want to do the concatenation of again, so just copy that. And there we go. Oh, but this is called user ID. Sorry. So there we go. Now we need to change this query a little bit. Is it? No, select item ID from user items where user ID. Yeah, that's correct. Now we can actually start working on our C# script. I think I need to make a folder for our scripts. So just let's call it scripts. And then I will keep creating more folders later. So here, let's create a new C# script. It's going to be called, or no, I think we were doing it all inside the web script. So here in Visual Studio, we have our web with our get date, get users. Yeah, this was where we had all of our web functions, our PHP calls. So we're going to reference this function, get users. I'm just going to copy it and paste it down here. I think, yeah, here. And we're going to call these get user items. Wait a minute, I think I called this differently. So here, yeah, it was called get items IDs. So let's call this that, get items IDs. I just like to have consistent naming so that in the future I don't mess up anything. Something I learned the hard way. So get items IDs.php, that's the URL that we want. We're going to send it, but look, we don't have a post form. So we need to create that. I'm going to create it, just copy here. Actually, we just need one field. So before we send it, so here, up here, we're going to create the form. We just need one field, and that field is going to be user, it was user ID. Let's check Visual Studio Code. Yes, user ID, like that. And username is not a variable that we have. It should be actually user ID. We're just going to call it that, and we're going to get it as a parameter. So string user ID. This could actually be an integer since our IDs are integers, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to keep it as a string. Now we have the form, we have that. We need to also add the form as a variable here. So we're just going to type comma form. So we're submitting to that PHP our fields. And oh, sorry, here is get. Yeah, I had to change more than one thing. We're going to use post. Now we're just going to debug this. We can retrieve the results as binary data. We don't want that. I just want to get the text, which is going to be our JSON file. I cannot return it as a string because this is an enumerator. So we will have to create a callback function where we call this. So for example, our item script called this get item IDs. There we have to have a callback function that is going to be called here. Callback function to pass results. And the results are going to be stored here as a string JSON Array equals this. Now I really want to try this from Unity first, so let's just print it in the console. So we need to log in with our interface, and we have to store that user ID. So we need to get the user ID when we log in. So let's change that. Here's our login function. So login, we need to have a callback so that we can get the ID, or we can simply store it in our singleton. So I remember we have a singleton here, which is main. We could have another singleton for our, maybe our user info or something like that. I think that wouldn't be a bad idea actually. So create C# script user info, just so that we separate classes and it's easier to see in the tutorial. So I'm going to open this user info. We're going to create a public instance of this here. So public user info. So here we're going to add a variable public string. Actually, it's not a good idea to be public, but now for the sake of simplicity, we're going to make it public. It's going to be a string, and it's going to be called user ID. We also can have username, user password. We could have all the information that we want from the user, user level, public string, user coins. Let's do it like that for now. So we have all this info, we don't need these functions, and we're going to store the information there. We don't need this. So here, just like we created that, we're going to do the same here, but for user info, we need to add the component to our main object here, our main game object. There we go. Now this is going to be filled every time we log in. So let's go to the login function here in web.cs. Here, login, we have a username, we have a password. So let's do this. If this is correct, so here, if there is no errors, we're going to have it logged in. So simply call main.instance.userinfo, or you could create a function in userinfo where you just put all the information you want automatically. Actually, that's how we should do it. So maybe we should better do it like that immediately. So userinfo is going to have one function called public void SetInfo. So here we're going to have two parameters. Let's call it user ID and string username and string user password. You know what? I'm just going to set the username and user string in this function. And it's going to do that. So username equals username, user password equals user password. And why I said that we should do this like this? Well, that's because this information shouldn't be public. If it is public, everyone can change these variables, and that's not good for us. Someone might do something, or if we have a team and someone sees this variable and they change it directly, things can go messy. So when you have a function to change the information, you can make this private, and then people can see, oh, I only can use this function to change that information. Where is this function called? And so on. So here we're going to call that function from the same class. So main.instance.userinfo.setInfo, we called it, yeah, setInfo, and we have a username and a user password. And you can actually see here, when you see it's very small, but you can see the order of the parameters here, so you don't need to be worried that you're going to screw up the order. So do we have that? It's just called password. So username and password. Now we have that. We also need to set the ID. So login should give us the ID in the text. So instead of getting us logged in success or something like that, it's going to return an ID. And if that ID is -1 or something like that, or maybe 0, we are going to know that we had a failed login. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code, login.php here, where we echo wrong credentials. We can keep that, or we can return something like -1 or 0. Or here, depends on how you want to make your codes. But here in login success, I don't want to show this anymore. I want to echo the user ID. How we do that is very simple. We just need to use row, which is like a dictionary or a associative array. Row, and what we want is the user ID, and I think that's called just ID, but let's make sure by checking our database. Here in users, it's just called ID with, oh, I think here is small letters and here is capital. That's my mistake. I shouldn't have done it like that, but anyway, let's just do it here. So here, echo row ID. That means that we're going to get our user ID Otherwise, we can have wrong credentials or the username does not exist. Now, since we're going to be getting our user ID here as the text, we can actually use that and use it to get our user ID. So we can add that part in our user info. So SetInfo. We can have another function called public void set ID. This could be called something like set credentials actually. So let's rename it. Remember, Control R twice. Set credentials. Set ID. And here we're just going to have a string called ID, and we're going to set user ID as the ID. So now back to web, in the login function, set credentials, and we also want to set our user ID. So I'm going to copy this here dot set ID. That is the text from the download handler. So text. And inside our set ID, we can have an if statement, or you can put it here, if wrong credentials or user not found, then you don't run this. Otherwise, you run this. I'm not going to do that right now, but you get the idea. So here, you're going to set the ID so that later on we can use this ID to get the items. This is starting to get a little bit long, guys. Please bear with me. So now here in user info, we're going to create another function. Actually, it should be here, get set. Let's do that. So how do we do this so that we can read it from any class, but we can only set the value from this class? Well, it's very simple. We use a property, which is type this, get and private set. But this needs to be a public property, so we type here public. So we have a public string user ID, but this user ID can only be set privately, that means within this class. However, we can get this publicly. Okay, now that we finished all that, we can go back to our getItemsIDs function, and we can use our user ID to get those variables. Where does our user ID comes from? Well, that user ID, we can get it after we log in. So please, let's try this as soon as possible. I really want to try this. So let's close these items, the user profile. Let's close that. And let's open it here, log in. So we're going to create this button here, and this button is going to call our function just so that we can try it in our console. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Here, we're just going to create a public void function. Show user items. And here is just going to start a coroutine. Get items IDs. And what is the user? Well, the user, of course, is main.instance.userinfo.user_ID. So we want to get the items from that user. And we need to set that button to that function. So button here, the list is empty. We add one function. We drag our main object there. And from the web, I think it was web. Oh, here, sorry. Show user items. Web show user items. Now we can use that. So now we're going to play. We're going to try to log in, and then we're going to try to show the items there. So test user 1 2 3 4 5 6 log in, and wow, what's this? Undefined index ID in. Let's see what's going on. Oh, okay. So here in this query we have the problem. We're selecting the password only from our users. So a quick fix that we can do to do this is that when we log in, we also are going to get the ID at the same time from the username that we're trying to find here, the login user. Of course, you could have the query to just select the password, check if the password is the login pass, and then do another query down here to get the ID, the coins, the level, all that stuff. But now we're just going to add it here in the same SQL so that we can get it from Unity. Let's try this one more time. Enter username, test user, enter password 123456, login, and ID. Yeah, that's ID 1. Let's try this with another user, test user 2. I think this was QWERTY, login, and we got user 2. Nice. Let's do this. Oh, wrong credentials. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, login. Now we have the ID 1, and now if we press this magic button, our items should be shown there. Nice. Item ID 2, item ID 3, and item ID 1. Awesome. Let's try to make test user 2, QWERTY, login, wrong credentials. I think I typed it wrong. QWERTY, login, 2. Now if we press the magic button, we only have one item. Nice. That's what we wanted. So guys, I'm so sorry this video started to get very long, so we're going to stop it here, and I'm going to upload a part 3 of this video where we're going to actually use these items IDs to get the information and set it here in the user profile here in all this awesome view. So we're going to fill the name, the price, and all of that in the next video. But guys, don't worry, I'm going to upload it as soon as possible. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your view. Please like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. That really helps a lot. And I will see you all on the next one. Goodbye.